Welcome to the BuyBox Experts podcast. We bring to light the unique opportunities brands face in today's e-commerce world.
Hi, I'm James Thompson, one of the hosts of the BuyBox Experts podcast. I'm a partner with BuyBox Experts and the former business head for the Selling on Amazon team at Amazon, as well as the first account manager for the Fulfillment by Amazon program. I'm the co-author of a couple of books on Amazon, including the recent book, Controlling Your Brand in the Age of Amazon. Today's episode is brought to you by BuyBox Experts. BuyBox Experts takes ambitious brands and makes them unbeatable. When you hire BuyBox Experts, you receive the strategy optimization and marketing performance to succeed on Amazon. We also help investors with due diligence services. Go to buyboxexperts.com to learn more. Before I introduce our guest today, I want to send a big shout out to the team at Disruptive Advertising. For off-Amazon advertising, Disruptive Advertising offers the highest level of service in the digital marketing industry. Focusing on driving traffic, converting traffic, and enterprise analytics, Disruptive helps their clients increase their bottom line month after month. Check out disruptiveadvertising.com to learn more. Our guest today is Chris McCabe, CEO and founder of ecommercechris.com, a firm that specializes in assisting merchants on Amazon.com and other platforms with their various selling pain points. Chris is a tireless advocate and support source for merchants in all e-commerce marketplaces. Prior to ecommercechris.com, Chris was an investigation specialist at Amazon for several years. Chris, welcome and thank you for joining us today on the BuyBox Experts podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
Chris, Amazon launched Brand Registry 2.0 a few years ago, and that program was supposed to help a brand protect its content and intellectual property on Amazon. But I'm hearing seller complaints that these protections are hardly bulletproof. I've been hearing much noise about brand abuse issues affecting sellers. Can you tell us more about what this brand abuse is and what different kinds of abuse are out there?
Yeah, and it's the typical good news, bad news, mostly bad news. But the good news is that there's better awareness about it inside Amazon and among sellers who are trying to get educated on this topic. Okay. In the past, it was wild things happening to you. You didn't know why. You called somebody like me. You called Amazon. You tried to figure it out by asking, a bunch of crazy questions. Why is this stuff happening to me?
Yeah.
I think now people understand that there is a concept called brand abuse. This is something that can be reported to abuse prevention teams. It's still a new concept, so sellers mostly don't understand it. But the fact that it exists to the extent that it does in the forms that it takes means that every brand looking to protect themselves has to understand this concept as thoroughly as possible, as quickly as possible.
So break it down. What are some of these examples of brand abuse that brand or trademark owners should be aware of?
A lot of it is a combination of dirty tricks or people trying to manipulate loopholes or manipulate Amazon systems, investigation teams, and so forth to take out their competition. That could take the form of using a black hat service to buy from a competitor and report terrible things about the safety or the authenticity of the products. That's one. Okay. There's also fake reviews, right? You can also either do that yourself sometimes or hire a black hat service to buy and leave terrible reviews about the quality of the products to hurt their sales rank and the searchability of those items. Beyond that, there's also listing abuse, right? Mm-hmm. Where some people are finding keywords suddenly popping up in their back end that are getting the algorithms to take their listings down. Their listings are actually suspended. We work on, mountains of these cases every week or month in terms of listing takedowns and ASIN suspensions for terms that the seller themselves didn't put in there. And what does that mean? It means the kind of brand registry protection that you were describing a moment ago doesn't really exist. It's not that it's not bulletproof.
Yeah.
It's not really, there's no there. And unfortunately, it's a problem Amazon knows about, but hasn't put the right tools or teams in place to fix.
So I'm a brand. I went and I got a trademark. I went through and I got brand registry. Mm-hmm. But now I am the victim of brand abuse. Amazon's coming after me, claiming that I'm violating intellectual property, which might even be my own intellectual property.
Right.
It's easy for a seller to get very emotional when they get something like this from Amazon, especially after Amazon has rolled out the brand registry program specifically to protect against these very types of issues.
Right.
So how do you think the disconnect between what sellers expect on Amazon and what Amazon's actually able to enforce today, How do you see that disconnect being addressed, either by the seller or by Amazon, short term, long term? Give me your thoughts.
Amazon itself expects you to use the low-level tools that they give you, which they kind of know don't really work. And you probably know, if you're a brand who's tried them and failed, you know they don't work either. So that's the first disconnect that needs to be addressed. We usually advocate sellers escalating things early and often away from those low-level, open a case with support, open a ticket with brand registry. To us, that's something that works maybe single-digit percentages of the time at this point. Almost no value, right? So the first thing you have to do is mentally switch off the idea that something terrible like this happens. And it certainly looks like it's beyond just a glitch in tools or even an Amazon investigator's incompetence. It looks like you're the victim of an attack or some form of abuse. You start with throwing away the idea that you're just going to scribble out some email and send it to seller performance. That's not what the world is like anymore. Do you open a case in 2 seconds just so you can refer to a case number? Sure. Just so you can say to your account manager or to whoever answers you later on from executive seller relations or from another team member that responds to your abuse prevention case, just so you can say that you did the first step. Yeah, that takes 2 seconds. I'm not going to say don't do that.
Yeah.
But don't spend any more time on it than that. I'm still hearing from sellers who are telling me they're 2 or 3 weeks in and they're wasting tons of time. They've already lost God knows how many thousands of revenue with the weeks that they spent on it, but they're also spending that time in something that has a low likelihood of success. So they have to understand to escalate is something you consider earlier, not later.
How do I know that I have been the subject or been the, how do I know brand abuse has happened to me versus there may just be a glitch in the system? So you talk about be aggressive in taking certain actions, but often it takes a few days to even realize what's going on. Did Amazon change some algorithm and now there's something wonky happening to my listings? How does a seller self-diagnose that, oh, this is the big brand abuse problem? This is not just some little glitch.
We've had some people come to me just because they've seen articles I've written or videos I've done on this topic and it sounds similar. But beyond that, sometimes it's so obvious that you wouldn't need me. It would be obvious to you. Somebody's putting back-end keywords in that are illicit terms that would just get you flagged and get your listing suspended. Sometimes referencing illegal products, for example. And you and I, over the months and years have talked about that, but that's listing abuse. That's really easy to accomplish. Somebody's trying to overwrite your flat files with their content. So one means of prevention would be make sure you're syncing up with Amazon's API and reloading your flat files multiple times a day to prevent somebody from tucking those illicit keywords into your backend illicit terms into your backend keywords.
Right. Are there other types
obvious, like anyone can see I didn't do this. Your first question is this a mistake on my side? Self-diagnose if you made a mistake when you were loading a flat file or where you were creating the listing. If it's something you didn't do, then and it's been added by someone else, that means a competitor did it.
So I'm a brand. This is the first time it's happened to me. I am preemptively reloading my flat files, but I haven't had enough time to diagnose what might be the root causes of this issue. Take me through what sequencing should I have for notifying Amazon that there may be an issue with my listings versus taking due diligence of stuff within my own operations. How do you see somebody who's dealing with this for the first time actually sequencing out what the actions they should be taking in the immediate term?
Okay, I mean, the due diligence side can vary because we deal with sellers all over the map in terms of skill level and experience when it comes to compliance. First step is to have somebody that works with you or you yourself are a listing compliance expert who can go through your flat files and make sure nothing illicit's in there by your own hand, something that you added. But assuming you clear the first hurdle of making sure your own house is in order and you haven't added, product detail page abuse type wording into a title or into the detail page content, and then you're looking at something somebody else could have added, you're appealing for reinstatement of that ASIN, but it's a hybrid appeal. You have to think of those types of appeals as two different areas. One is reporting abuse. The other is an ASIN reinstatement appeal. Seller Central gives you an appeal button in most cases that you can use for the ASIN reinstatement appeal. What I'm telling people to do is include language in the first paragraph or somewhere, that will be caught by somebody reading it without too much trouble, saying we're also reporting this to abuse prevention teams. We're certain that we did not do this. That means that somebody has attempted to mess with or alter our detail page content and our keywords. Then get the abuse prevention guys on it. Indicate to abuse prevention that you appealed through Seller Central, you hit the appeal button, you submitted an appeal there, but you understand that unless both things happen, you may not get the listing reinstated, number one. Number two, you might get it reinstated, but it might go down 24 hours later with the same kind of attack.
So for the benefit of our audience who doesn't necessarily know what's happening behind the scenes, most of us have filed tickets to get ASINs reinstated or to get something changed.
Right.
We don't necessarily take action in complaining about there's some nefarious activity going on. Amazon, could you please diagnose who's responsible and take necessary action? Even if something does happen, Amazon will never tell us, but take us through that second part of complaining that there's somebody else doing something to my listings. What is Amazon going to do if you report that part of the complaint?
Not in every case, but hopefully they're going to track back and run down who monkeyed with your listings and why, and take action against that party. So part of what you're doing is reporting it to prevent future attacks, not just to resolve the one in front of you.
Do you see
you're also trying to discourage your attacker? I've had to work on cases where listings went down between 5 and 10 times, maybe over the course of a month. So if you keep getting it reinstated and they keep knocking you back down, at some point it's not worth the attacker's time anymore either. This is kind of the off Amazon thing that you're trying to do, or the off, not dealing with Amazon teams. You're dealing with the attacker. You're trying to discourage them from wasting their time on you because they know they could be spending their time on somebody who doesn't know how to defend themselves. Once you show the attacker you know how to defend yourself and report abuse, and you can fix these within hours, they start thinking that they're wasting their time and they find another target. So that's not a great answer for the other person who gets attacked, but that does help you with your situation.
You talked about filing that ticket with seller support. Is there a role for filing tickets with brand registry support in situations like this where you've got brand abuse?
You can do both, and you can do them very quickly, and you can reference those ticket numbers or case numbers, brand registry or support. But in this day and age, I've watched these teams for a long time now. I almost never see positive results from people doing that. It's just a starting point for complaining somewhere else later on that you did do what Amazon tells you to do, but it didn't create any solution or effect.
Right. Okay.
So it's kind of an excuse just so that you don't waste time on conversations or email threads later, most likely an escalation later. You don't waste time explaining why you didn't start with a seller support case or a brand registry ticket. Fine. You want me to start here? Here's my ticket. But beyond that, don't expect that to solve your problem. What concerns me now is that brands are burning days and weeks expecting results from those things.
Yeah.
And I suppose it's just not popular to say, don't try those things. They're not going to work. But that's the situation. That's the case. Why put your head in the sand? Why not just address the reality that most of the work we do, people like us who are abuse prevention experts, most of that is on the escalation level. It's not, hey, we're going to open a case for you and solve this in the next, 24 to 72 hours. That's not how brand registry works now. Maybe it did in the first year, but most brands tell us that they've already done those steps. They're hiring us because none of that works. Yeah.
So I'm a brand. My listing hasn't been taken down, but I noticed there's something going on with my listing. How can I bolster my case with seller performance or brand registry or seller support when I'm the one flagging that there's something going on with my listings? How do I start to document and communicate with Amazon before they actually pull down the listing? Or is that something that I even want to do?
Try to narrow down the timeline. I've interacted with different teams at Amazon that have given me some tips when I was trying to solve this for sellers.
Yep.
A lot of times when you report abuse to them, unfortunately, they don't seem to be great at backtracking changes in their tools and their systems. So if you can give them, I know this sounds ridiculous to an extent, but if you can give them a narrow enough timeline, like I think this happened between 3 and 4 a.m. or 3 and 4 p.m., whatever, I understand that's somewhat unrealistic, but we have over time worked with sellers who are keeping track of this sort of thing and keeping an eye on it, because then they can try to go into their tools and see who went into your account or went into brand registry, so forth, and made those changes at the time.
Does it make sense for sellers to build a system that allows them to submit their flat file every hour, every 2 hours, every 6 hours?
It's starting to. I didn't used to advise that people do that, but because brand registry has gotten to the point where you can't rely on them for something that they should be protecting you from, the answer is yes at this point. Sellers should be investing in that, because otherwise they're leaving a field vacant in their flat file. Somebody else is filling it with something.
Right.
It's all just meant to trigger an algorithm that suspends the account, like an automated action, right? And we're not here to talk about, the playbook for black hats and how they attacking people. But honestly, these things are so omnipresent now. We're constantly hearing from brands every day. This isn't just a once a week thing anymore. This is something that any brand that sells any SKU or ASIN with any degree of success, somebody's watching you, somebody's looking to take a shot at you. You just need to spend a lot of time on your prep, even if you haven't lost the listing yet. It's not suspended, let's say, but you've got an abuse prevention report ready to go just because you're selling through that inventory so quickly.
Yeah.
It's going to cut your timeline on resolution. So,
do you see people playing with aspects of the listing beyond just the content? I mean, are people getting their prices manipulated? Are they getting, you said images, what else are you seeing?
It's mostly titles. It's mostly the backend keywords, of course, titles. We've seen specific detail page text added, things that were unflattering for the product, extremely unflattering, sometimes vulgar, right there on the detail page, live on the site. Images, we've all kind of heard about. Everybody heard about that federal investigation that led to the indictment last year. A lot of the people who were indicted were paying employees at Amazon to manipulate pages and take the images from the product image and put something offensive in there, right? And it was kind of like that was their way of giving a raised middle finger to their competition. Things like that mean that somebody's inducing somebody to accept a change to your listing and help attack you. If you see something like that, you have to reach out to Amazon legal. You have to go to VP level or higher. Yeah.
So I want to talk about legal in a few minutes, but let's talk a little bit more about the types of things your firm does. Your team specializes in navigating the abuse reporting process at the manager or senior manager level within Amazon. So you're talking with teams when the brand registry support or the seller performance support alone are not necessarily resolving the brand abuse issues.
Right.
What advice do you have to brands that say, okay, brand registry support and seller performance support may not be the way to go to expect a resolution? Are there things that sellers themselves can be doing that may not necessarily involve hiring an expert like yourself to participate in getting a resolution?
Yeah, I mean, step one is know the email queues that you would start with, and maybe we can kind of put some of them at the end, down below under this video, but or send an email blast out afterwards so that they can have those specifics. But know the players in the game. At this point, a lot of managers are known, publicly known. Sometimes VPs are known. They've either been in DC testifying in front of Congress, or they've been quoted in articles, lots of places, actually. Some of them are very well known. I mean, they might be household names to people like us, but sellers know them too. I've heard sellers name drop a lot of VP level Amazonians or managers in conversations with me. I wouldn't have even expected that they know who those people were, know who their teams are, know what they work on. Because if you escalate to people like that, they delegate to their leads and their senior investigators. And those are the people who are reviewing the abuse report and ultimately deciding to take action. Again, it helps if you've already sent the initial email to the proper queue, number one, so that they won't complain that you're, coloring outside the lines or going outside of the process and using that as an excuse not to do anything, which has been a problem in the past.
Yes.
But number two, it gives you a reference point. Like, we emailed March 17th. It's been 3 weeks. Nothing's happened. Over those 3 weeks, we've lost $77,000 in potential revenue versus this period last year. Facts, data, things they can understand and review very quickly, for one reason, because they're probably deluged with many, many, many of these, and also so that they can appreciate the pain you've gone through for something that is no fault of your own that you had no control over.
So let's come back to what you said earlier with regards to Amazon legal. Sellers get very frustrated when they see that their problem isn't being magically resolved.
Right.
And so I have many a time been asked, should I just get an Amazon or get a lawyer and go after Amazon?
Yeah.
And lawyer to lawyer, we can fight this. So my question to you is, in what sorts of situations does it make sense for a seller to bring a lawyer into the discussion if there's been a brand abuse complaint?
In most situations, the lawyer can't do anything. And there are self-promotional lawyers out there saying that a letter from a lawyer carries more weight, motivates Amazon to move. I mean, that's mostly, marketing stuff. If the lawyer tells you, I had an exact case like this, I wrote to a specific person in Amazon legal, that person responded to me, and I have an ongoing back and forth correspondence or quote unquote relationship with them, and they've reinstated listings for this reason in the past, and they've got that kind of success story, and they're not sugarcoating it, and they're not vague about it, then fine. I mean, if that's actually going on and it's real, and they can show that to you or prove it to you in some way, then great. Any other case, it's just smoke that they're puffing, and they're trying to reach into your wallet. So there's no legal. I mean, there's no legal argument that you make. My brand's being abused. I'm suing Amazon. I'm not going to go to arbitration. I'm going to get Amazon into court. I don't see any evidence of any lawyers approaching it that way successfully. Now, if you've got evidence of some sort of sabotage of a criminal nature, so it's not even a civil penalty that you're looking at, like suing for damages, but you think you're being sabotaged where laws are being broken, then you could be speaking with an attorney with criminal expertise who will write a letter to Amazon saying, we think there's something criminal going on here that will involve, federal agencies or law enforcement. That's a totally different thing than writing a letter to Amazon Legal about something that would have resulted in civil litigation outside of the arbitration.
So for all these brands that have gone and hired a trademark attorney or a patent attorney to get some of that initial legal protection in place that then led them to go to brand registry, those relationships with those attorneys are already in place. And while lawyers obviously differ from one level of expertise to another, if I own a trademark now, or I own a patent, and there's something happening on Amazon where somebody is violating that, inherently I can see that, I want to get my lawyer involved and say, go after
for the
people.
infringement process. Yeah. I mean, I'm assuming we're talking about brands that are already trademark registered in brand registry and have set up their intellectual property accordingly. If your rights are being infringed upon, then you should probably pair a letter from an attorney with an escalation saying, our trademark rights aren't being enforced here by Amazon. We pursued this through the channels you gave us, and absolutely nothing's happening. You do have a basis for an argument there. You just don't have a basis to sue, right? They'd push you into the arbitration. If you started sending letters to legal, first of all, once you send certain letters to legal, all the other avenues close off to you. You can't escalate through other non-legal channels because legal, it becomes their purview, and nobody else is going to respond to you. Amazon annotates on the account, this is legals now, so don't answer. Several people have said that over the years, that once it gets to legal, it's done. Then you're legal or nothing at that point. So you've lost a lot of other options.
Yes.
Be sure that that's the way you want to go, number one. Number two, if you are working with an attorney, you want to make sure that they've written a good letter for you. I mean, there's a lot of quality range in attorneys out there, right? I've seen terrible letters. I've seen good ones. There are some that I've, written an escalation to go along with an attorney's letter. So there's been kind of a two-part to the process, an escalation and then referencing the lawyer's letter. But obviously I don't take a case where I'm writing an escalation saying, hey, Amazon, you didn't review this, or you said you reviewed it, but there's no evidence you did, or it was reviewed improperly. By the way, here's a letter from an attorney that's attached, but it's not very good and it doesn't really say anything. So you can't just throw a legal letter at them. You have to have something of quality, which brings me to kind of another point in terms of all abuse prevention and all abuse reporting. Don't just worry about where it goes. Think about the quality of the report that you're putting together, because people have shown me stuff that they've sent in that's all over the place. It's like the written equivalent of a Jackson Pollock painting, just completely scattered. No one would read it. No one would take it seriously. So spend at least as much time, if not more time, on what you're writing down, how long it is, how clear it is, what data is in it, what facts are in it, and not so much like, well, should we send it to Jeff at Amazon, because I understand sellers largely don't know where to send things, and that's a real problem, but that can be solved. You can get that report into the right hands later. Make sure you've got a worthwhile appeal or escalation report for.
So the picture you paint is not a particularly pretty one if a seller gets hit by brand abuse. So let me ask you, what can I do as a seller to either preempt the likelihood that I'm going to be hit with brand abuse, or what can I do to be absolutely prepared that when that horrible day comes, I'm in pretty good shape to be able to move quickly and in an informed manner?
I actually have several good news, positive points to make.
Great.
That'll brighten things up.
Great.
One, just overall abuse prevention, like I said in the beginning, much better understood now, both inside and outside Amazon. And you're more likely to see action as opposed to somebody just reading something and throwing it away like a year ago or 2 years ago. They're aware that sellers and others know how to escalate these things. They're more likely to take action these days than 12 months ago or 4 months ago. Okay. So start with the premise that if it's done properly, you'll see some action. Like you said, they might not respond saying, hey, we fouled this up. We're sorry we didn't have your back. We fixed it. No, they're not going to say that. Sometimes they don't message you at all, but they will fix it if you approach it the right way. And if they don't, the people who are responsible for it, you can go elsewhere and complain that abuse prevention teams are aware of the problem you're facing. They're just unwilling to act. So these things are fixable. You can ask about brand exclusivity, which is not a well-known concept. It's becoming better known, at least inside Amazon. Not all Amazonians know or talk about brand exclusivity. Most sellers and most of us didn't know about it until sometime last year. Brand exclusivity is something you should at least explore whether or not you can use it. It's a program, it's not something that's open to the public per se. It might be invitation only, but the bottom line is if you need that protection, it's similar to people that used to try to get their brands gated, right? So that no one else could sell. Gating, of course, being no one else can sell that on that detail page. Brand exclusivity, so as it's been explained to me, as it's been told to me, is no one else can overwrite your listings. Your flat files won't be overwritten by a competitor's content. And you will be the only person making changes to your detail pages.
So that brand exclusivity works. That comes in through a single Seller Central account.
I've got some clients talking to their account managers about it. Their SAMs, strategic account managers. Others don't have a SAM who knows much about it, but they talk to category managers about it, which brings me to another positive point, which is account managers are at least a little savvier on these topics. They don't necessarily take care of it for you the way you'd hope if you were paying them the monthly fee.
Right.
But involve category managers. If a category manager knows that you're being attacked in a way that's similar to the way 7 of their other top sellers in their category that they are measured on and responsible for are being attacked, you expect them to take some interest in that because that's knocking down their bottom line and the amount of revenue they're generating by managing that category. So category managers, unless they're putting the blinders on, are taking much more of an interest in this because it impacts their jobs. Account managers are responsible for helping you sort problems like this. And this does impact your revenue, even if you say, well, I'm just in charge of your marketplace growth and your revenue growth. Yeah, well, this impacts your bottom line if you're losing thousands of dollars a day when your listings are down.
Right.
So whether it's an SAS ticket, right, when you're in the SAM program and you do those SAS tickets, again, that's not the be all end all. That is a starting point. You can reference an SAS ticket when you do other escalations. We're doing this all the time, every day, pretty much at this point. That works too. So there's a lot that works now that did not work in 2020 and way more than what worked in 2019 when we were still kind of learning the best avenues and approaches.
Right. How do you see Amazon solving some of these black hat techniques? If you were in a position that you could go in and you could close some of these loopholes, what are those loopholes that you see without explaining how everybody can go do black hat?
Right. I mean, Amazon needs to improve their tools and monitor them better. And they need to train up and better oversee how those tools are being used. And when they're being abused, that needs to be flagged immediately. And somebody with knowledge, experience, and insight into what's going on needs to review it within 10 minutes, not 10 days. That's the real issue. The scalability. They still haven't figured out the scalability, and black hats are taking advantage of that. They still haven't, like you said, patched the loopholes. Black hats know what the loopholes are. Within the black hat community, some of the loopholes are gaping and they're obvious. So they're taking advantage of them. Amazon has to take that seriously because at scale, this is impacting thousands of sellers, not just hundreds of sellers. And then on a higher level, I mean, the potential good news is that we have a new CEO coming in later this year who will be at least partially aware of the nature of these problems. That means hopefully he'll have the ability to reallocate resources into the right places, get the right brilliant minds working on it, get the right engineers working on it. When I was working there, if we saw stuff like this, it wasn't just me coming up with brilliant answers with my colleagues. We would sit with engineers and talk about potential solutions, what were scalable solutions. And that meant something, because then they could build a tool and come back and you'd tweak it and you'd give them some feedback on it. And eventually, at that point, you'd launch it, some trial and error. You would be doing meaningful work at that point. Until you get to that threshold, you're just guessing, or you're just stabbing in the dark, or you're playing roulette. When that happens, none of these loopholes get patched up, unfortunately. So I'm looking forward to Andy Jassy, with his background in AWS and some of his technical knowledge from his previous gig, contributing in ways that we haven't seen yet in the marketplace.
Any closing thoughts, words of hope for Amazon sellers who are constantly looking out for the potential attacker they don't know is around the corner?
The one thing that's going to be tough, the words of encouragement, I'd just say stick to it. Don't give up easily. Have a thick skin, persevere, because there are people who fix a couple of these attacks and then they'll get hit the same way the next day and their listing goes back down. Like I said, I've had people we've worked with, we've had to do it 10, 11, 12 times. So that's the part that's a little bit disheartening, is that Amazon allows it to repeat itself. So from what I can give you for advice, stick with it. Make Amazon believe that you're going to keep coming back with the same info about the same abuse reports. And if there's a delay or if there's no action taken, you're going to take resolution of your problem to a different team and tell them everywhere you've been before that.
Yes.
So you have to be resilient. I mean, this is a time where sellers, unfortunately, we're in a kind of a limbo where Amazon's still catching up to the problem. And, some sellers don't understand what's going on. There's going to be a period of where you're going to have to summon all your will and strength to continue going back. And you can't just say, I'm sick of this. I don't want to report it anymore. I want to pull this basin and give up on it and do something else with my time. Don't do that. I'd encourage you to keep your shoulder to the wheel, because eventually this will pay off. We've already seen great strides in this area in the last year. So,
Chris, thank you for joining us today on the BuyBox Experts podcast. For those of you interested in learning more about ecommercechris.com, please visit ecommercechris.com. And now to finish today's podcast, I'd like to share some final thoughts. For third-party sellers to be successful on Amazon, a critical lever will be soliciting feedback from customers. We at BuyBox Experts are really big fans of the team at Ecom Engine and its tools that help Amazon sellers to simplify the process of messaging customers of Amazon orders. To learn more, go to ecomengine.com. And with that, I want to thank you for listening today, and I look forward to joining you next time on the BuyBox Experts podcast.
Thanks for listening to the BuyBox Experts podcast. Be sure to click subscribe, check us out on the web, and we'll see you next time.